In the vast, frozen expanses of Alaska, where temperatures plunge to minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit and winter darkness stretches for months, stands Fort Wainwright, a testament to American military foresight and adaptability. What began as a remote airfield in the 1930s has evolved into one of the Army's most strategically vital installations, embodying nearly a century of Arctic warfare expertise and geopolitical vigilance. Alaska's military significance emerged slowly after its 1867 purchase from Russia. For decades, the territory remained a military backwater, hosting minimal Army presence in what most considered a frozen wasteland. This perception changed dramatically in the 1930s as Japan's aggressive expansion across Asia and the Pacific forced American strategists to reconsider Alaska's value. The territory's proximity to Asia transformed it from liability to asset, a potential springboard for power projection across the Pacific. Arnold's vision takes flight. The transformation began with Lieutenant Colonel Henry Hap Arnold, future commanding general of the Army Air Forces. On July 19, 1934, Arnold led 10 B-10B Flying Whale bombers from Bowling Field, Washington, D.C., on an ambitious 890-mile round-trip journey to Fairbanks, Alaska. This pioneering flight served multiple purposes, demonstrating American aviation capabilities to the world, testing aircraft performance in extreme conditions, and identifying suitable locations for permanent military installations. Arnold's expedition identified Fairbanks as an ideal site for an airbase. Located in Alaska's interior, Fairbanks offered relative protection from coastal attack while providing access to both Asian and Arctic regions. The site's extreme temperatures, ranging from 90 degrees in summer to 60 degrees in winter, made it perfect for cold weather testing, a capability that would prove invaluable in coming conflicts. Congress responded to Arnold's recommendations in 1939, appropriating funds for an airfield near Fairbanks. The installation was named Ladd Field in honor of Major Arthur Ladd, an Army Air Corps pilot killed in a 1935 South Carolina plane crash. Construction began in 1940 under Major Dale V. Gaffney, the cold weather test station's first commander. The timing proved fortuitous. Within 18 months, America would be at war. From testing ground to wartime hub. Pearl Harbor's attack on December 7, 1941, transformed Ladd Field from experimental station to operational airbase overnight. While initial Japanese attacks focused on Hawaii and the Philippines, military planners recognized Alaska's vulnerability. Their concerns proved justified when Japanese forces struck the Aleutian Islands in June 1942, bombing Dutch Harbor and occupying Kiska and Attu Islands. The Aleutian campaign brought Ladd Field under 11th Air Force control as part of the Alaskan Defense Command. The base's garrison swelled to nearly 1,000 officers and enlisted personnel, while the concrete runway was extended from 5,000 feet to accommodate heavy bombers supporting operations against Japanese forces. Fighters and bombers staging through Ladd Field played crucial roles in the 1943 campaign that finally dislodged Japanese forces from American soil. Yet Ladd Field's most significant wartime contribution came through the ALSIB movement, the Alaska-Siberia Lend-Lease route. With German submarines making Atlantic convoys hazardous and Japanese forces blocking Pacific routes, Alaska became the vital link for delivering aircraft to the Soviet Union. The route's importance cannot be overstated. Soviet air forces desperately needed American aircraft to counter the Luftwaffe's initial superiority. The Great Air Bridge. The Lend-Lease operation at Ladd Field represented one of World War II's most remarkable logistical achievements. American pilots ferried aircraft from manufacturing plants to Great Falls, Montana, then north through Canada to Ladd Field. There, Soviet pilots, officially on diplomatic missions since the USSR wasn't at war with Japan, took possession of the aircraft for the final leg to Siberia. The operation's scale was staggering. Over 8,000 aircraft delivered, including Bell P-39 Era Cobras, P-63 King Cobras, Curtiss P-40 Warhawks, B-25 Mitchells, and A-20 Havocs. Soviet pilots particularly favored the P-39 for its low-altitude maneuverability, while American bombers provided crucial ground support for Red Army counteroffensives. Before each transfer, maintenance crews painted over American insignia with Soviet red stars, a simple act symbolizing the complex alliance between ideologically opposed nations. Supporting this massive operation required expanding Ladd Field's capacity to 4,500 troops. New hangars, maintenance facilities, barracks, and support structures sprouted across the permafrost. The Air Transport Command assumed control of Lend-Lease operations, transforming Ladd Field from remote outpost to international aviation hub virtually overnight. Women warriors in the Arctic. January 1945 brought another transformation when Women's Army Corps, WS, personnel arrived at Ladd Field. Far from token participation, these women filled critical roles across the installation. Under Major Betty Etten Weiker's command, WACs served as mechanics, logisticians, administrators, and medical personnel. Many joined the Army Airways communication system, highlighting Alaska's emerging role as a global aviation crossroads. The WAC's contributions extended beyond routine duties. First Lieutenant Christine Woodall established the Extreme Temperature Operations Unit, testing equipment under Arctic conditions. Woodall made history as the first woman to fly in a B-29 Superfortress above the Arctic Circle, demonstrating that gender posed no barrier to Arctic operations. Male soldiers' reactions proved surprisingly positive, with one writing in the Post newspaper, "The gals in the WAC are doing 155 different Army jobs and doing them damn well." WACs at Ladd Field shattered stereotypes about women's military capabilities while enduring the same extreme conditions as their male counterparts. They proved that determination and professionalism mattered more than gender in accomplishing military missions. Their departure in December 1945 marked the end of an era, but established precedents for women's military service that resonate today. Cold War transformation. World War II's end in September 1945 brought immediate changes. The Lend-Lease program terminated, ending the steady stream of aircraft to the Soviet Union. Yesterday's ally quickly became tomorrow's adversary as Cold War tensions emerged. Ladd Field's proximity to the Soviet Union, once an asset for cooperation, now made it a frontline installation in the emerging superpower confrontation. The 1947 creation of the Independent Air Force brought redesignation as Ladd Air Force Base. Simultaneously, Alaska Command became America's first unified command, recognizing the territory's strategic importance. The Army maintained significant presence, stationing the 2nd Infantry Division at Ladd AFB in 1948 to provide ground defense and continue cold weather testing. Throughout the late 1940s and 1950s, Ladd AFB hosted increasingly sophisticated operations. Aerial reconnaissance flights monitored Soviet activity across the Bering Strait. The Air Defense Command Center tracked Soviet aircraft movements. Cold weather research expanded, providing crucial data for potential Arctic warfare. The Korean War's outbreak in 1950 added urgency to these efforts, as combat in Korea's frozen mountains validated Alaska-based training. The nuclear age arrives. The late 1950s brought fundamental changes in military strategy and technology. Nuclear weapons transformed defense planning, while intercontinental ballistic missiles reduced Alaska's importance as a bomber staging area. The Air Force began transferring assets to nearby Eielson and Elmendorf Air Force bases, which better suited jet aircraft operations. The Army gained full control of Ladd AFB on January 1, 1961, promptly renaming it Fort Wainwright. The name honored General Jonathan M. Wainwright, Medal of Honor recipient, who endured Japanese captivity after commanding American and Filipino forces following MacArthur's evacuation from the Philippines. This naming choice reflected both historical continuity and recognition of Pacific theater sacrifices. Under Army control, Fort Wainwright hosted the 171st Infantry Brigade, mechanized, as Yukon Command's primary combat element. Nuclear-capable Nike Hercules surface-to-air missiles arrived in 1959, providing defense against Soviet bombers. The 1960s also saw significant aviation expansion with activation of the U.S. Army Alaska Aviation Battalion in April 1961. Helicopters provided essential support for missile range sweeps, fire patrols, and reconnaissance across Alaska's vast distances. Vietnam and reorganization. The Vietnam War brought new relevance to Fort Wainwright's cold weather training as elements of the 171st Infantry Brigade deployed to Southeast Asia in 1966. The contrast between Alaska's Arctic environment and Vietnam's tropical jungles demonstrated the Army's global reach and adaptability. The brigade's conversion to light infantry in 1969 reflected lessons learned about mobility and flexibility in difficult terrain. The 1970s brought significant organizational changes. U.S. Army Alaska, U.S. ARAL, discontinued in 1974 as part of post-Vietnam restructuring. Fort Richardson assumed greater prominence, drawing units away from Fort Wainwright. The 162nd Infantry Brigade's relocation symbolized shifting priorities and reduced Arctic focus during the decade of détente. Recognition of Fort Wainwright's historical significance came on February 4, 1985, when Ladd Field received designation as a National Historic Landmark. This honor acknowledged the installation's crucial role in World War II and Cold War history, while preserving important structures for future generations. Modern transformation. The Soviet Union's 1991 collapse briefly reduced Alaska's strategic importance, leading to 1990's budget cuts and force reductions. However, Fort Wainwright adapted to new missions. U.S. Army Alaska, U.S. Iraq, activated in 1994, replacing the 6th Infantry Division and centralizing Army command in Alaska. Environmental challenges also emerged, with decades of contamination earning EPA Superfund site designation. The Army's 2002 construction of cleaning facilities demonstrated commitment to environmental stewardship alongside military readiness. The 21st century brought renewed purpose through the Stryker Brigade Combat Team concept. The 1st Stryker Brigade Combat Team, 25th Infantry Division, 125 SBCT, made Fort Wainwright home, providing rapidly deployable forces, balancing firepower and mobility. The brigade's 2004 Iraq deployment marked the first Stryker unit in combat, validating the concept's effectiveness. Operation Arctic Pegasus in 2015 returned Fort Wainwright to its Arctic warfare roots, featuring the first Stryker deployment under extreme cold conditions. This exercise demonstrated that despite decades of focus elsewhere, the Army retained crucial Arctic capabilities. Modern threats from Russia and China's Arctic ambitions make these skills increasingly relevant. Contemporary challenges and opportunities. Today's Fort Wainwright encompasses 1.6 million acres of stunning Alaskan wilderness, while hosting over 7,700 soldiers. Modern facilities include upgraded housing, recreational amenities from golf courses to ski slopes, and comprehensive family support services. The Army maintains positive community relations, offering seasonal public access to recreational facilities through permit systems. Yet significant challenges persist. Alaska's extreme environment creates unique stressors. Months of continuous daylight or darkness disrupt circadian rhythms. Bitter cold limits outdoor activities, and geographic isolation strains family relationships. The Army has responded with increased investment in mental health services, recognizing that Arctic readiness requires psychological as well as physical resilience. Climate change adds new complexity to Fort Wainwright's mission. Melting permafrost threatens infrastructure while opening new Arctic navigation routes. Increased international competition for Arctic resources demands enhanced American presence. Fort Wainwright's location and expertise position it perfectly for addressing these emerging challenges. Legacy and future. Fort Wainwright's evolution from remote airfield to strategic stronghold mirrors America's journey to global superpower. Each era brought new missions: cold weather testing in the 1930s, Lend-Lease operations during World War II, nuclear defense during the Cold War, power projection during the global war on terror, and renewed Arctic focus today. The installation embodies institutional memory of Arctic operations that few militaries possess. From Hap Arnold's pioneering flights to modern Stryker operations, Fort Wainwright has accumulated nearly 90 years of cold weather expertise. This knowledge grows increasingly valuable as great power competition returns to the Arctic. Looking forward, Fort Wainwright seems poised for expanded importance. Russia's Arctic militarization and China's polar ambitions ensure Alaska's continued strategic relevance. The installation's combination of operational experience, training facilities, and strategic location provides irreplaceable capabilities for defending American interests in the high north. Fort Wainwright's story ultimately reflects American adaptability and foresight. What began as recognition of Alaska's strategic potential has evolved into a cornerstone of Arctic defense. From World War II's Lend-Lease operations to today's Stryker brigades, the installation has repeatedly proved its worth. As new challenges emerge in an increasingly contested Arctic, Fort Wainwright stands ready, a sentinel in the snow, guarding America's northern frontier with the same vigilance that has defined its mission for nearly a century.